All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all for joining our second Open Circle CircleCI Open Circle sessions. My name is Jeremy Neese. I am the head of DevRel here at CircleCI. Kind of the whole purpose of these Open Circle sessions is to enable the community members within our developer community to interact directly with teams here at CircleCI. And employees, and to discuss all things that are happening in the tool. It's also an opportunity for the community to kind of learn about the latest and greatest things that are kind of happening, things we're rolling out, things that can add some value, and also kind of gives a continuous feedback loop between the community and CircleCI. So thank you again for joining, and we will be doing some, if you have questions, utilize the Q&A here. We'll kind of go through them throughout the session. And for that, now I turn it over to Angel.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Jeremy. So can everybody hear me? Yeah. All right. So today we've asked our coworker who graciously accepted our invitation to come and talk to us. His name is Kyle. Now, Kyle, I always get your name wrong. Is it how you pronounce Tryon?
All right.
See?
So yeah. This is not the first time in my life I'll have to go through this, but if we spell my name, it'll become obvious. It is Tryon. So Tryon like a pair of pants.
There you go. Tryon. I've known, and by the way, I'm embarrassed. I've known him for like 2 years now, and that's pretty embarrassing. Sorry about that. But I prefer to ask, right, instead of butcher it. So yeah, we want to welcome Kyle Tryon to the Open Circle session today. Again, he graciously accepted the invitation. He's a very busy man. He's basically the guy or the person that's actually building out Orbs these days here at CircleCI, making sure that the project is in tip-top shape and dealing with our partners all the time. So like I said, he's a very busy person, and I want to thank you for showing up today. And yeah, so why don't you introduce yourself and your name properly, like, and a fun fact.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you. That was a great introduction already. But as Angel said, my name is Kyle. I am our community and partner engineer. There's actually 3 of us on the team, although we all kind of do different things. I am the person who mostly operates with our Orbs. Orbs, for anyone who's not aware, are these little packages of configuration for our service. They're kind of like plugins. So it's an easy way for you to just kind of drag and drop utilities or services into your config. So I work with our community that builds our Orbs, as well as partners, which are companies that we work directly with to build their Orbs. Fun fact I'll go to, you might see behind me, there are some lights. When I find the time, I am also a YouTuber who puts together some mostly educational content online about all this fun stuff as well.
Yeah, man,
that's great.
Yeah, I've seen some of that content. It's good stuff. Yeah, all right. So I guess there's some awkward silences. So Kyle, we're going to talk about Orbs today. I'm assuming there are some folks in the webinar. We're not calling this a webinar. In the event here that are probably users of Orbs. Maybe they're just using the Orbs in the pipeline. The folks that are developing custom Orbs to accomplish some of the work they need to accomplish within their pipelines. So it would be interesting if folks in the chat here, if you can do like a Q&A, or say maybe something like you're a user, if you have a question or whatever, just let us know it'd be interesting to know what level of use, what you're doing, if you're developing and using or just using the Orb. That way, we can gear the conversation to be more beneficial, especially with such a small crowd of folks. Looks like we have like 10 people, which is cool.
A little more personal.
Yeah. So the idea behind this is to answer any of your questions, and maybe if you have a problem with something, we can, help maybe live, figure it out. So I believe, Jeremy, you may have had some questions, or why don't we just go into an intro of Orbs? I know Kyle kind of touched lightly on them. In my job with the developer advocate, I use Orbs day in, day out when I can in my demos, because the problems that Orbs solve are generally things that, like Kyle was saying, you know, if you have a piece of software, let's say you're running maybe some Selenium tests on your Node.js application, right? Or you're deploying artifacts to S3, an S3 bucket. In the configuration YAML, since YAML is a data structure, and it's not a programming language, you really can't figure out ways to reuse you know, calls within the data structure. So there is no encapsulation or like object-oriented programming type thing within YAML. So what we've done at CircleCI is outfitted the backend system to be able to take in parameterized YAML, right? And when you have that, now you get that reusability and everything's kind of encapsulated, right? So, and it also helps you with maintaining the code. I actually have a talk that I gave a few times already, but it's called CI/CD agility and avoiding pipeline sprawl. And that's where I talk about, you know, how YAML is a great kind of declarative language or syntax for data structures, but it's not great at being able to, since it is a data structure, it's not great at, you know, being able to perform logic in it, right? And it doesn't give you that parameterization or template that you could use in the system and reuse the little bits. Otherwise, you know, with YAML, you're constantly cutting and pasting. Now with Orbs, again, we've outfitted the platform. We saw the need to help our users solve these sprawl problems, right? And the high volume of syntax that are in these YAML files or the configuration files for the pipelines. So Kyle, can you talk about a little bit about, like, maybe what are some of the highest used Orbs that CircleCI has, right, in the system?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure 100% off the top of my head that the Slack Orb is by far our most used Orb. It's actually, I think, our first Orb too. Kind of fun story about that is before I was on this team building Orbs, I was our senior support engineer. And right when this project Orbs was coming out, they, you know, CircleCI, we asked a whole bunch of employees, can anyone basically figure out how to use this new product that we're coming out with? And so I did build the Slack Orb back then, and it still exists today as one of our most used Orbs. I don't know that I want to go into the source of this one right now. I think we have some cleaner Orbs, some easier Orbs to go over, but just to give an idea of like what's possible. On the Orb registry, you can search for any of your Orbs. I think most people on this call are mostly familiar with that, but for anyone who's not, search whatever Orb you want. So Slack shows up here. You can see that the current version of this Orb is 3.4.2. Every Orb page comes with some getting started information, basically how to import that Orb. And then every Orb has some actions that can be taken in the form of commands, or sometimes they have full jobs that you can just drop into your workflow. So the most used command here is notify, which really is just a simple parameterized command that allows you to send a message to a Slack channel very easily. And this is all done under the hood. We'll take a look at the source of how it's actually created in a little bit, but this is all done under the hood using curl requests and bash and a whole bunch of stuff, just using these parameters here so that you can send any message you want off in your pipeline whenever you want. So if you have a deployment that goes off and you want to get notified in a certain channel about that, this is a great way to do that. And the whole point here being mostly, I think in this talk, is not what you can do with this particular Slack Orb, but really to get a sense of what's possible so that if you wanted to, you can open a PR on the Slack Orb as it is now, or you can make your own Orb or anything like that. If you think it'd be a good opportunity to take a look at the Node Orb, which is one of our higher used ones, not nearly as high as Slack, but also we just updated this one. It's really well written at the moment, really good idea of how you might use an Orb. So let's just skip right into the usage examples and take a look at running node tests. So what we've done is there's actually just a test job, which will automatically download your source code. It will install your NPM modules. It will cache those NPM modules and then run some test command, which by default is actually just NPM run tests. So you can see here, here's like an example of how you could do a node application that deploys to Heroku. So if you import two orbs here, the Heroku orb and the node orb, you have a workflow called test and deploy. Very, very simple. This node orb provides the test job, which does everything I just mentioned earlier. And then assuming this passed, you could use the Heroku orb. The Heroku orb has a command called deploy via Git, or excuse me, a job called deploy via Git. And in this case, we can see this is all standard CircleCI stuff. We're applying a filter for master, so we'll only deploy on master. And we're saying it requires tests, which means that no test needs to run first. So in this 15 lines right here, you can have a pretty successful build, test, deploy for a Node.js project on Heroku just by using these two orbs. So it's a really, really easy way for users to kind of get started, whether you're a user who is a user of Node or Heroku, or you're kind of looking for examples of how to build orbs, either for personal use or if you have your own product that you're looking to share with people. This is a really good way to get them started with that. I see we also got a lot of questions. Does someone want to queue those up for me?
Yeah, so yeah, I got a few questions first before we, so the way we're probably going to do it is, or for the folks out there, the participants, ask your questions in there. What we're going to do is start voting up these questions so that we can kind of take the top ones voted, and then we'll work our way down. That way, it's kind of a fair way to get people's questions, or to get the questions that are most interesting to people answered first, and then we'll work our way down, in our answers. That's generally how we do it here. Forgot to mention that earlier. But I do have a question for you, Kyle. So with the Node app, right? We just implemented matrix, which is, I see it right there, right? Matrix testing, which is pretty cool.
Yes. However, I wrote this literally days before we came out with matrix. So this is matrix testing, but it's done a little bit differently.
Sure.
But it is a completely valid way, but we actually have a more vanilla way of doing it now.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, this is another way of, that you could have implemented orbs to run. Before this, we just recently released matrix testing. So what that is let's say you want to run CI against or test against different versions. Maybe you want to make sure that there's no breaking changes, and like regression testing, and then also maybe testing it for future versions. And you want to make sure every build or every build that you, or every job that you have, is tested against these versions. This was one way to do it. Now we have a new way for the matrix testing, but again, it's just showing off the power of the orb. And what you could have accomplished, what you can accomplish with it, right?
That reusable, configurable,
Exactly.
It's the same job. All you're saying is, instead of whatever version of Node, I'm going to use this version of Node. So it gives you that power to say, I don't need to define that multiple times. It's just there for us.
Right. Otherwise, you would have to copy much more code. So the code behind this node/test namespace, you would have had to have copied that multiple times, and just to change that little bit right there, which is the version number, right, of the framework you wanted to test against. So again, just highlighting some of the benefits of using orbs, right? So it's a cleaner configuration. And if you need to make a change, you go into the source and update, right? So the source of that orb will then be updated. And look at that, right? You would have,
this is all
some of those bits,
magic.
Not all of it, but some of those bits would have been in there. So this kind of shields you from that. It's encapsulation for those of you that are, into object-oriented programming. So that's the value of the orb. And the node orb is pretty cool. I haven't played with it quite yet, but I plan on using it in the future.
Well, 2.0 just came out, so I would recommend, if you haven't played with it before, take a look now. I think one of the most day-to-day useful things that you'll run into it is really just we have this install packages command, which is just simply, normally you'd run npm install or npm CI, something like that, to install your packages. All this is doing is it's just really quickly wrapping that in a cache key. So what it's doing is, instead of just installing your packages, it's going to actually attempt to load from your cache, then run your packages through npm CI, or if you're using Yarn, that's all configurable through these parameters. And then it will also attempt to save your cache. So it's just reducing the amount of complexity. You can just run that. Or again, if you're just going to end up running tests anyway, if that's the whole goal of what you're attempting to do, just feed it that test job. You can change the test command, like this is npm run test, but if you want to change that to some other script you have built into there, very easily swapped out.
Cool. Yeah. So let's I think we kind of covered what an orb looks like, and you know, the registry. Did we touch on that registry a little bit, or
I think we can
maybe
take another look
before
at
we
it.
don't jump into answering some of these questions? And I don't know, Jeremy, do you have something?
And probably a good direction there is, you know, as we kind of dump into the registry, we have had a few questions about, you know, how one might develop a custom orb. So that would be a good, probably go for the registry, and then let's dive into creating a custom orb.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be a whole subject. Let's just take a quick look at the registry since we brought it up. Somewhat public news is we will actually be updating the registry at some point. I'm not putting a date on that, but this is not the final result here. We'll have updates coming in the future, but what you have here is an instant search powered by Algolia. You can search any topic in here. We'll do that in just a moment. And you have 3 tabs. Really, the 2 that mostly matter are this first one here, Certified and Partner, and then the last tab here, All, which will, by default, you will not see any community orbs. Any community orb or partner orb, you'll actually have to check off a box in your settings. So they're hidden by default, as well as they're not vetted by us in any way. So a community orb is the same as any other open source application. The code is available for you to look at, but you know, we don't want to imply that CircleCI has looked into it. So you can take a look at these badges right here. Certified means it was written by us here at CircleCI. If you see on the next page,
it's written and maintained, right, Kyle?
Written and maintained by us at CircleCI. And I should also mention, not just us at CircleCI. I mean, all orbs are open source. It's part of the community. So it's by you all as well. Most of these orbs, almost all of these orbs, you'll see the source code link as well. We're trying to update that as well so that they'll all have them. So if you have an issue, you can open up an issue, you can open up a PR, anything like that. So not entirely us. Similarly, if you see this partner badge, same thing, except instead of being written by us, you'll see it was written by a partner of ours. So we do an initial analysis, we get together with them, we help them write the orb initially, and then from that point on, they'll be the ones who maintain it. But it's pretty much exactly the same process, just the difference of who's maintaining the orb and who wrote it originally. Versus if you go over to our community orbs, we'll search up Terraform. So on Terraform, we can see that our top most used community orb for Terraform is this one here. But again, you know, we haven't personally looked into it, but all the source code is available. So you should definitely take a look at it and see if it suits your needs, or take one of these and modify it yourself. You can always fork it or something like that.
Yeah, these community orbs are great for folks who are, you know, have specific use cases, and they can customize their pipelines to use the specific things they're trying to solve. But the nice thing is that I like about like how we designed this was, you know, this is all open, right? And like Kyle said, if you're using a community orb, it's open source, and you can, you know, send pull requests, fix it, or fork it and do your own, which is pretty interesting. And yeah, it's kind of our way to kind of give the community kind of feel to some of the features, especially this is really big. Orbs saves a lot of time in the sense that, you know, when you're building pipelines, I work with customers that have like, you know, 2,000 lines in their configs. And prior to Orbs, and when they started leveraging Orbs, especially for like things like AWS type of interactions, yeah, you know, they took that 2,000 line orb configuration down to about, you know, 700 lines or smaller in some cases, right? So, you know, it does help, and that also helps with readability, helps with maintenance of these pipeline configurations. Because imagine if you have, that's just one repo, right? Imagine if you have 100. Now you have to, you know, manage all of these things. And the beauty of the orb is, as long as you have the orb implemented in these configuration files, like let's say an S3 bucket upload across 100 different configurations, and you need to make a change, you do it in one place, and then it propagates over, right, to all these other calls, the other orbs the other configurations that are calling these orbs. Obviously, the version numbers that change, but that's a simple, right? Sed in a command line, just rip right through all your files and replace that version number. So is there anything else you wanted to touch on there, Kyle, before we jump into some of these questions?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, do we want to answer any particular question, or do we want to jump into orb creation?
Yeah, let's jump into let's hammer out some of the other. That's going to take a long time. I think let's hammer out the easy, low-hanging fruit, and then we'll jump into the more complex topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have here a question.
Go ahead. Yeah, take Mike Dodds.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay, so Mike Dodd asks. He said that speed is key. Orbs load very fast, but custom Docker images can load slowly. Would love to use Orbs, but by the time I check code out, run computer install, node install, etc., it can take a long time. So I use Docker image instead of Orbs for the most part, but they're slow. Is there a way to cache external images, or if I build a custom Orb, will that be cached?
Yeah, so images and orbs are actually, for the most part, really separate. There is some overlap between an orb and an image, but they are generally separate. Any dependency that you need should be in your image. So for instance, if you need node installed, that node orb actually does provide the ability to install node, but that is not the recommended situation. That would be slow. Not only that, you're actually relying on the network. So that's not part of your CI/CD process to if node is down, for instance, to download node. It's available, that's not recommended. You should be using a node-based Docker image. Now, when we're talking about how slow it is to download some Docker image, so that is a function of cached layers, right? So on CircleCI, we provide these things called convenience images, which are a whole bunch of images that we've developed that have a whole bunch of CI tools on them, things that you need like Git and SSH, things like that, as well as some libraries or frameworks. So we have our convenience image for Node, we have our convenience image for Ruby, things like that. Those images are highly cached in our service. So if you were to use those, they should load very quickly. Now, in the last few days, we've actually released these next generation convenience images. So these will start becoming more popular. And the cool thing about these is this new generation of convenience images, we're kind of really going off orbs here, but they're built in a way that they all share this same base image here. So this base image is just an Ubuntu Docker container that we can build on top of. So it has those useful tools in it. And now what we'll do is we'll have a new convenience image that is built off this one that then installs Node. And the major benefit there is you'll get your Node Docker image, and it will be highly, highly, highly likely that it is cached, or at minimum, the base image is cached. Now, what we would recommend is if you are in a situation where you need to install something and that process takes a while, you should build a custom Docker image. And if at all possible, you should base your custom Docker image off of this one here, just because you will get the major benefit of the largest layer being the main operating system should be cached, and then you can just add on whatever additional tools you need there. The reason you would use orbs versus something that's installed in your image is really to run tasks or scripts or things like that. So your image should have Node installed, but your orb should then use those Node commands to orchestrate what it is you want to do with that installed thing.
All right.
Great.
So
that's a good answer. Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, we need to open up some mics. So if Dave Joyce, if you're there, I'd like to open up your mic so that you can ask Kyle your question, and then you guys can have a conversation about that. So if you're prepared to do so, I'm going to go ahead and open up your mic. Your mic is hot, Dave.
All right, sweet. Yeah, so hey, how's it going? So we at ANET, they've been using CircleCI for a while, but I'm sort of spearheading migrating our CircleCI configs to use Orbs because, well, our historical ones are like real bloaty. They're just bloaty. I'll just say it like that.
Yeah.
And Orbs like they just trim like an order of magnitude worth of bloat out of any given config. And they're really reusable. They're awesome. So my question is really specific, I recognize, but so I recently started, so we're like a kind of a polyglot shop. We have Java, we have Go. So I've started using the newest Go Orb, which is like way faster than the older Go Orb. Really impressed with that. And just last night, I replaced like 20 lines of hack makefile garbage with the AWS ECR Orb to build and push Docker images up to our ECR registry. So that's awesome. But my question, and Mike has been trying to help me here already. So I've created this Docker container, and I've pushed it up using one orb, the AWS ECR orb. How do I hand off to another orb? How do I do something with one orb to hand off? You know what I'm saying? That's really like.
I absolutely do. Honest truth is you can't really, and I'll kind of explain what you can do and what you can't do, because there's always ways around it. Something I wish that we could do with orbs, and actually if there's enough time, maybe we'll even kind of talk about something that might come up in the future. But orbs are not full programs, as in by default, they don't necessarily expect any kind of input or provide any kind of output. They really just run some script, right? So an orb is generally designed to do some defined task, kind of isolated from itself. So like push image, something like that. An orb could be designed any way you want theoretically, but they really can't take inputs and outputs. What you can do, and what we do is often kind of use the file system as just an in-between measurement. So for instance, if I need to output a file somewhere and then I have another orb that takes a file from somewhere, I can orchestrate that kind of thing.
Yeah, can I add to that? So what I generally do, and I understand what you're doing there, but Dave, but what I generally do is a lot of times I leverage environment variables, right, to kind of persist that data within orbs. But I think if you build a custom orb, though, you should be able to, right, Kyle, and you got more experience in this than I do, be able to nest orbs within orbs. So, right, if you would have to explicitly still use some sort of medium, like a file, pump some data out into a file, or maybe grep some inputs into another orb or something like that, right? You could hack it, but at the end of the day, I would think about it, maybe leveraging, especially if it's just metadata that's not really, need to be protected. Environment variables, or like Kyle said, some file system type mechanism. Yeah. So that's generally what I do.
So long story short, it sounds like you guys are suggesting that I could compose an orb out of orbs and maybe accomplish what I'm trying to do. Because really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do a composition of an ECR build and push, immediately followed on success of that, immediately followed by a CloudFormation stack update.
Okay,
so
yeah.
What you guys are saying is that I could compose that. I could build my own orb that's a composition of the AWS ECR and AWS CLI orbs that you guys have built, and skin the cat that way.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. You could just use those commands that we have, and because you're the one orchestrating that, you'll know where things get output to, and then you can just, so if push is one step that you're using from that orb, and as long as that's successful, your pipeline will continue. You can move on to that next step, which will be expecting whatever it is that you're passing to it.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. That definitely bears investigation.
And
Thank
Dave, if if you have any issues, just reach out to us, and we'll do the best we can to get you up and running as well. Right?
Okay.
Like, so this what this is about is getting you the help you need to be successful using these tools. So
Fantastic.
And if we take a look at building the orbs in a moment, maybe that'll jog some ideas as well.
Okay, great.
We'll get deeper into that.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Well, thanks,
Anytime.
Dave.
I guess is there any other? I guess we
There
can
was
just jump
one.
into.
There was one more question.
All right, Sanjiwa.
So yeah, since
Let's open that mic.
Let's see here. Yep. All right. So can you hear us, Sanjiwa? Are you able to talk? You're on mute at the moment. There you are.
Hi, I'm actually new to CircleCI. I'm coming from Jenkins pipeline. So I recently started looking into Orbs to customize our build pipelines because we have like a certain amount of custom modules that we need a specific way of building those things. So sometimes the generic orbs that you guys have already defined, as according to your previous discussion, we might not be able to use them as it is. So we need them to mix them together and define our pipeline. And the one that I'm working on actually regarding to the custom config files. So if we duplicate the config file all over the repositories, it will be kind of difficult for us to make a change in the config file. So I'm trying to centralize those config files in one location. So my current plan is to put the common config files into S3 bucket and sync those things when we start the build initially. So there are a better way to do that.
Yes, in fact, the first thing I want to tell you is probably something not CircleCI related at all. Are you familiar with GitHub Sub Modules?
Not actually.
I think this might actually be what you're looking for. I was hoping for a better, let's see. Nothing with GitHub on this, huh? Is it called Sub Modules, Angel? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it is.
It's a Git submodule. It's actually Git, but GitHub implements it.
GitHub has a whole UI around it. All right. Well, I'll give you the idea about it, but basically, you can have one repository that has some code in it, and what you can do is in other repositories, you can just reference that file from that repository. So basically, if you have one repo that has a settings or a configuration file, you can edit it there, and it will automatically exist in your other repositories as it is. Does that solve the problem you're looking for?
Yeah, I guess so. I haven't, I'm not familiar with this Git submodule. I definitely will try to look at it.
Yeah, it can be done with Orbs for sure. I just think that this would be a better way to do it. If you wanted to do it with Orbs, for instance, and we've done things like this before, but what you can do is in the Orb source itself. So basically, and we'll go into this in a moment when we take a look at how to write an Orb, but in the Orb source itself, you have some bash in there. So what you can do is just basically copy and paste the file in there and then just write it out to the system. But for Git clarity and editing purposes and everything, I think submodules is probably the best way to go for that.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, thanks, guys.
No problem. All right, I think we're good on questions at the moment. So do we want to take a look at Orb development? Cool. All right. So
yeah, why don't we start off by showing off, starting a fresh idea project, right? So if I'm just sitting down and I want to create a new orb, how do I do that?
Yeah, I think most people are going to start at our documentation really, but I think what something that's going to be really important to take a look at first, if you're not already familiar with it, is our reusable config reference. This is just basically, if you want to write an orb, you have to be good at the config language of CircleCI. And CircleCI config is just made of a few different components, and Orbs just make those components reusable. So you're going to have an idea of some task you want to accomplish. So for instance, with Slack, it's ping some webhook, and we want to ping some webhook with some data. So we know that we're going to need a command that sends data with parameters that modifies what that data is. So if we're taking a look at our reusable config reference, I would obviously recommend taking a look at the whole thing, but let's take a look at reusable commands. And you'll see an example of how this is put together. I think everyone here is mostly familiar with this, so we'll hop into the real code in a moment, but you can define commands with the commands key, name your command. So this one's called say hello. That command has a description and a set of parameters. This one only has one parameter called to. It is expecting the type string. And if you do not provide a value, it will have the default value of hello world. So if you were to then in this command supply the step of run, which is echoing. Now this could be any bash, right? This could be a much more complex script. But within this script, we're utilizing this special feature here, which will interpret our parameters for us. So if this was a curl request, we could change this request so that the host is somewhere else using parameters or something like that.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So yeah, what Kyle's showing here is, you know, and I know you're going to probably get into a little bit, Kyle, but just for my headspace and maybe some of the newer folks here. So, you know, we produced the version 2.1 that introduced this concept of parameterized YAML, right? And prior to that, version 2.0, we did basically a rewrite of CircleCI version 1 that didn't have any of this, right? It didn't even have Docker, support for Docker type image, right? So with this 2.1 version, the system, like Kyle said, the Orb is just basically a way to kind of package it up into a nice, sweet, you know, reusable piece of code. But in the underpinnings of the changes in 2.1 is the addition of this parameterization. So you could actually run these parameter type features inside of your configs right now, right? So like you don't need an Orb necessarily, but what you lose if you don't use the Orb is the ability to, you know, basically have a one-stop shop, right, for changing that code. I just want to make that clear for everyone. And then there's another piece to this too. So you have 3 elements within an Orb. And it's literally the same elements inside of any configuration file. And the elements are commands, which Kyle just showed you. The other one is the executor key, right? So where you're going, the runtime you choose to execute whatever it is code, right, that you're going to use. And then the other piece to that is the jobs. So you can encapsulate the functionality of all those 3 elements, right, and in different ways. So just so everybody's clear, right, these are, again, you can parameterize, you can use the parameter bits and features inside of any CircleCI config file, but Orbs gives you that wrapper, right, for all, just wraps all of that functionality into a nice, clean kind of, you know, object that you could then reuse throughout the configuration files.
Yeah, and just to respond to the questions we're getting. So as you just went over, it's more than commands. We also have jobs and executors. Just to go over that again, jobs are a collection of commands and an execution environment. So when we were taking a look at our node, or let's take a look at the node Orb source. We're going to go into building an Orb in a moment, but let's just take a look at the source. This node Orb provides executors, jobs, and commands, right? So the commands we offer are install npm, install our packages, which we'll take a look at this deeper in a moment. But as we mentioned, this installs your npm packages, install yarn, and install node itself. These are the commands that we offer that you can utilize. However, you can also utilize a job, which is a few things. Let's actually take a look at the job source. So I'm going to skip the parameters for just a moment. A job has an executor. Here it's saying that we want to use an executor of the name default. We'll go into this in just a moment, but essentially what this is saying is this Orb also provides an executor named default. with a tag for version, which we saw in our example earlier. What that is, it's saying we want to use a node image, a Docker image with a particular version. So this job is going to utilize that execution environment. And within this job, it's going to utilize these commands. So checkout, which is just part of CircleCI. Let me skip this one for just a moment. The next one is install packages, which is a specific command of this node orb. And then it's going to run our tests. So this job is a whole collection of things that is going to happen. And instead of you defining a job within your configuration that does all of these things to run your NPM tests, you can just actually run this job as a part of your workflow instead of defining all of that. So you don't have to define a Docker execution environment. You don't have to define a job. You don't have to do anything. It's all going to be right here. Let us know if that answers that question. And if so, I think I'm going to dive into building these orbs because we're mostly good here. All right. So we were kind of looking at the node the node orb source. There we go. So this is how we develop the orbs currently. And actually, this is still an evolving process. So this is the newest iteration. We're going to continue to iterate it. We have a lot of ideas on how to make this better. Something that we plan to have in the near-ish future is a CLI command that will help you get started, such as CircleCI Orb init, kind of like similar to NPM init. We don't have that today, but what we do have is, if I can find the tab somewhere. Did I already close that tab? I think I did. So this is a precursor to this orb init command that we do plan to eventually have. But this kind of validated that idea and is what I would recommend at the moment. We have this Orb Starter Kit. And for the meantime, this is a fantastic way to get started. What it's going to do is it's a little script. You're going to run this orb init script, and I'll show you a preview of that in a moment. But what you're going to get when you are done running that script is something that looks exactly like this. It's going to give you a GitHub repository that's going to have a README file that looks exactly like this. It's already going to be pre-populated with the name of your orb. It's going to have all these badges already there. You're going to see all these folders are already going to be there, and it's going to come with some Hello World source code. So everything you need is going to be just, you're going to go into the source folder, you're going to go into the commands folder, and you're going to replace what's in there with the source code that you want. So everything's pretty much well built. Let me give you a quick preview of what that looks like. I have way too many tabs open. Here we go. So we should have, I'll play this while we're talking about it, but ASCII ASCII Cinema, whatever, however you would pronounce this, fantastic utility. If you're not aware, you can actually record your terminal, and it's all highlightable. You can copy and paste out of here, which is really cool. So you'll run this orb init script. It's going to do a few things. First, it's going to authenticate you with CircleCI, make sure that you have an API token. It's going to ask if you're doing a orb for your personal organization or if you're working with a real organization on GitHub. You'll select a namespace for your orb, which if anyone's created an orb, it's very much like an organization on GitHub, but on CircleCI. Then you'll create the orb name itself, and it's just going to walk you through setting that up. And when we get to the end here, oh, okay, we're still have a way to go. But when we get to the end, what it's going to do is it's going to provide you a link to this orb that you have already created through the system. It's already built, it's already doing Hello World stuff, and you'll just have a link to the running orb. The thing that comes with this, I'll spare us watching the rest of this. The thing that comes with this that's also really, really important that comes with that Orb Starter Kit is the configuration file that comes with it. So this configuration file is pre-built, pre-populated, ready to go. What it does is it helps you do CI/CD for your orb, essentially, as well as maintain releases. So take a notice, my last commit here, you see how it says semver major in there? That's actually a special thing. I'm going to go over this in a second, but that's a special thing that we've implemented for orbs so that when I merge to master something that says semver major like this, it's automatically publishing a new major version of my orb. It's really easy, really nice. So if someone wants to send me a PR, I can take a look at it. I just merge it into master using that little tag right there, and everything is taken care of for me. And this is all done in the magic in here. So let's take a quick look at this, and then we'll actually get into the orb itself. You're going to get this. We can see that it's importing our node orb so that we can test it. and our Orb tools Orb, which is something that's actually doing that automatic deploying for our Orb that I was mentioning. We have some integration tests. So this is just making sure that all of the functions of our node Orb are working properly. So if we want to take a quick look at one of these, here's integration test on Linux, just a Docker container that's installing node, and then literally just making sure that node is installed. That's one of our integration tests. We have a whole suite of those here. You can add those, you don't have to add those. And then this is all automatically added for you, but we're going to lint your Orb. We're gonna pack it together. I'll explain packing in just a moment. And then we're going to automatically promote the development versions of your Orb to production versions using that commit subject that I was mentioning earlier.
That's really cool that you have this sort of dog fooding, right, going on. You'll be able to run CI on the CI tool that you're building, which is really cool. Are there any plans for, like you were saying, Kyle, there's going to be more of a CLI type functionality? Are you planning on moving that especially that what was that called again? I'm sorry.
The Orb Starter Kit?
No, the validation, the config file that you use to CI your Orb. Is that also going to be included, right? Like
absolutely, yep.
Yeah, baked in is what I'm asking, because that's actually very useful. I would see that that's going to have a lot of value to, just another layer of like, okay, it passed its own CI build in a sense, right? I mean, there's no need not to do that.
We could even just take a look at like what that results in. And really what I'm showing you now is just how to use CircleCI. We're not even talking about Orbs anymore. But if we bad example. Let's take a look at the serverless Orb. Oh, right, I'm looking at the Orb Starter Kit, not Node. Here we go, go here. Pull request.
Yeah, see, you confused yourself, yeah?
Too many tabs, too many tabs.
That's the whole thing with nesting these things into one another. Sometimes it can bleed into confusion.
So,
but
here's an example of where we just released a patch update for this Orb. So same idea, but we wrote patch instead, and you will see somewhere in here should be some checks. Oh, here we are. I just saw them. Where'd they go? View details. Where'd they go? Do we have any, or is this pre-test? This might be pre-test. We've added them now, but I think I went to an old PR. All right, ignore me. Trust me, they're there.
The checks are up there, Kyle. If you go up in the tab, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, but they should have been at the bottom. Weird. All right, anyway, that's fine. They're here. So it went through 2 pipelines, and the one we care about is actually right here where integration tests are. And so you can see, here's all of the tests for our Orb. So we know whoever just sent that PR, which I think was me, it is me. When I sent this PR, what CircleCI did automatically, thanks to that config, that was automatically written for us, by the way. Now the tests I wrote, but you saw how simple they were. It was just use the Orb command and then make sure that it worked. So we just have that testing in a few different scenarios, and then we merge that, and it will automatically publish a patch for us, which is really, really easy, really, really great. Really easy to
These are what I call smoke tests. You're kind of just going in, testing out lightly testing the things that will break or should break, or I think it's just another QA level layer, so that you're not publishing garbage unintentionally, of course.
Let's because the Node Orb is a really good example, really fresh, really new. Let's just take a look at the source of this, and this is now we're going to actually look at like what do you do when you want to write your Orb. This is really it. Now you're going to get a folder structure if you use that Orb Starter Kit that looks just like this. So we're 90% there. You go into source. You're going to get these folders. There's a few different folders for each component of the Orb. The commands everyone's familiar with. Examples, in case you didn't notice, when you go to the registry, there is a usage examples area so that you can inform people on how to use your Orb. So if you want to include examples, as you should include examples, you'll need that folder as well. Any of these folders you can delete though. So if you don't need a job in your Orb because your Orb doesn't require it, just go ahead and delete that folder, no problem whatsoever. Executors and jobs, as we mentioned, and then the entry point is this @orb YAML file. Let's start here. So @orb YAML, this what happens on the back end with that special config that I showed you earlier? It's going to take all these files and it's going to smash it together into one Orb YAML file automatically for you. So we're just kind of doing this to make it easier for ourselves. So this @ symbol says, hey, this is my top level. This is where I'm going to get started. And everything inside here is just standard CircleCI config. We've just broken it into pieces. So this is a version 2.1 config file because orbs are config. We add the description to our orb. And remember, anything that you put in here is going to end up in the search results. So if there's a specific keyword that you're trying to make your orb known for, make sure it is in that description or the orb name itself.
Hey, Kyle, I got a question for you. What's the greater than sign there after description? Is that a multi-line caret or?
Yeah, so there's two different types of, so basically you could just type on the same line here. However, if you use this caret or a pipe, there are two different ways to do, multi-line. I forget what the exact difference is between the two. It has to do with new line spacing, I believe, but a caret or pipe,
I think the pipe allows, like it does new line, and then this is more like a wrapping. But yeah, I just wanted to. I always use pipe anyway, so
I use pipe as well. I think this was a holdover, but if you had just written the text right here, it would have worked just fine. What's important here, and this is a YAML thing, by the way. This is not an orb thing.
Exactly.
This pipe, you would have to follow that by an indent. That's just letting it know, hey, everything that's indented is part of this same string. That's right. That's what that is, just some fancy YAML. This, I bet most people on this call are probably not familiar with it because it's pretty new and we're pretty excited about this, is the new display key, which houses the source URL and home URL. So let's go back and look at the node orb again. It moved on me.
You got it. Oh, you rooked out, bro.
So you can see we just set for the homepage, we have Node.js, and then most importantly, the actual source code link is now an actual clickable link, which if you are an Orb author in the past, you know we've had to just kind of shove it in the description. So this is a new fantastic way to kind of get feedback and input and everything like that. So really excited.
So wait, this is the display? I didn't even know about this. So this is
brand new. Yeah, the display key is what's populating this
area
right here.
All right.
So these are now real clickable links to wherever it is that is relevant to your orb. We want a homepage if it's a particular product or service, and then the source URL is obviously for the source of the orb itself, so that we can.
That's really useful.
Yeah. It was a big push to get that done. Very happy that we have that now. Very useful. In fact, we can prove it's useful. People are clicking it a lot. All right, let's take a look.
It's all about the clicks.
All about the clicks, always. Let's take a look at install packages because that's kind of our most interesting command here. So this is all, again, this is just standard Orb stuff. But if you're kind of new to writing Orbs, this will kind of give you an idea of how this is really where the magic happens. So if you haven't written an Orb yet, this is really what you want to see. So the install packages command, it is named just by the file name. That's how we're getting that. And we're providing a description. And let's take a look at our parameters. So we should probably take a look at this reusable config guide again, but basically parameters have all different types. Enum, if anyone's familiar with programming, just says it's only valid if it's one of these two value types. So we have, it's an of type enum, and here are the enum values. By default,
enumeration, yeah?
Yep, that is correct.
All right.
By default, we're gonna select NPM, and every parameter has a description as well. We'll skip over some of these. All of these, we'll show them in a moment.
Hey Kyle, you got a question here from Andrew. So each command is a separate YAML file under the commands folder.
Yeah, so if you're using this structure, this Orb Starter Kit structure, which we find best, it's normally you would have one giant Orb YAML file, but what we're gonna do is break each major key into a folder, and then each file within that folder is one of those components. So you will have a number of commands, and within that commands folder, you will have a file for each command. Just to make a point though, not theoretically, literally, if you wanted to make a single commands folder, you could, or a single commands file, you could do that and it would work. We just find it easier this way. So remember that when we're putting this all together at the end, it's just one big empty file.
Yeah, so these are like just automatically included. Like it's inherent includes, right? So you can break it out, but anything that's in there will be aggregated and consolidated into one, right?
Exactly. Yep. And then the only thing it's doing that is magic, quote unquote, is you can see at the top here is a description. If we were to write this as a single file, the top key would actually be install packages. When we smash it together, we're just using that file name. So that's why it's important to break it out like that.
Smash it like Smash Mouth.
Oh, get the playlist going.
Yeah.
There you go. Next time.
We just closed the one I meant to go into. All right, let's take a look at the actual code here. So this is the actual command. It has those parameters we just went over. And the command has a number of steps that it is going to perform. So everything we see here, everything from here on out, except for the parameters, which we'll go over, is just, again, standard CircleCI config, as is pretty much everything. We have a special step called when. When will only take place when the condition is true. Let me take a moment there. This, again, doesn't have anything to do with orbs, but this is sometimes confusing. Condition is not a logical operator. You cannot perform any logic within your config. When condition is true, that means, is there a value here of true or false, or is it empty or not empty? So there is a parameter called with cache, which can only be set to true or false because it is a Boolean. So right now, by default, it's set to true, which means in almost any situation, unless the user specifically tells us not to, this command is going to fire. So this when command has some steps, which is restoring our cache. Now, remember, this command is installing our NPM packages. So what we want to do is to attempt to restore our cache, install our packages, and then save our cache. So that's what we're doing. Restore a cache. Then we have our next step, installing the node modules, which is going to error if it can't find a package.json file. Then it's going to attempt to run, depending on which package manager you selected, NPM is the default. It's going to use npm CI, unless you told it you specifically want to use npm install. If you told it you want to use yarn, it's going to, you can see where this is going. So, and then last step is you just save your cache at the end.
Yeah, so this is pretty interesting. So I know I said earlier that YAML doesn't have any kind of logic or like programming type processes. This is what I was addressed, or when I spoke of earlier, that we outfitted the backend of CircleCI, this new version of CircleCI, to be able to understand, right, the YAML and parameterize, and this lends itself to a little bit of conditionals, right? So it's not a full board, right, programming, but it does give you a little bit of flexibility within to be able to create YAML that is interpreted with conditionals. And of course, right, so like this is a great example there on line 60, well, I guess line 48 there, of how you could pipe out, right, a command and leverage bash. Now you gotta remember though, this is not going to work on a Windows machine or a executor maybe that doesn't use bash. So like the new version of Mac probably will take a shit on this because it doesn't have bash, or I guess it understands bash, but with the ZFS or Z, was it Z? I don't even know what the
there
new
are certain things you need to be cautious of.
Yeah.
Like grep behaves differently on Mac OS. So like a lot of the, for instance, the node orb does work on Mac OS. And that's part of the things that we test for, but there are certain commands that you would need to like add extra flags for if you want it to work on both. Good point about Windows though is pretty much nothing will work on Windows out of the box, except it's a good point to point out, Windows does have the bash shell on it. So if whatever you are doing can run in bash on Windows, like for instance, pinging Slack, that's totally fine. If you wanted to use Node on Windows, this would not be the orb for you.
Yeah, so yeah, and I just mentioned that because for folks who are maybe you have to support multiple platforms, just keep that in mind when you're building this stuff. And there was a question in here that I can answer real quick. So I think Anjum asked about, are these conditions only conditionals in the YAML available within Orbs, or can they be used in standard config? You can use them standard config.
And it should also point out that all Orbs, there is nothing in Orbs that is not standard config.
Right. Yeah, and everything you're seeing here can be accomplished in your configuration. Again, Orbs is just a nice kind of way to wrap up and package this stuff, because and then reuse it, right? So if you do something once, then you kind of have that source of truth, and the functionality is encapsulated in sort of a, again, if you're using, you know, object-oriented programming principles, right? Think of it as a class, and then, right, you're going to change those classes.
And probably a good piece with that is, you know, if you're not only reusing it again, but you can also share it within your organization with others that are also performing the same task. This stuff lives on. It's not just for yourself. It can be within your team. And that's where the, you know, source control, pushing it out to Git and whatnot, which also brings to the next kind of question here of like, is there any plan to introduce support to have private orbs near the future?
This is a real hot one.
And this would be a good one to probably end on as well.
But I'm going to let Kyle, and then I'll add my 2 cents.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, yes, they are planning on it. It is a thing that is highly talked about. I don't know when the exact release date is on that. I believe that Orbs coming to server is much closer to being accomplished. Personal opinion on it, I don't believe it should be necessary. There really shouldn't be anything in your config, especially within an orb, that should have the necessity to be private. But it is something that we're acutely aware of that people are asking for, and it is very much something that we are highly looking into after the release of Orbs for server.
Yeah, there's a few thoughts on the private orbs. So at least, you know, in my conversations with folks in the community, and I think that the main catalyst, at least from the folks that I've spoken to, for private orbs is there may be some proprietary goings on, right, on the backside. Maybe there's some tooling that, you know, you don't want to be available out there. So like, let's say maybe I can tell you there's some financial or regulated type industries that have, like, again, these proprietary tools that are not even you know, allowed to be utilized outside of whatever company, depending on the type of data they're playing with, or the type of regulations they're working under. So, you know, for me, it does make sense, especially if you're out in the cloud, right? So we have a lot of government type of clients and users. I can promise you, as a former employee of the federal government, using a cloud service like this will require, you know, certain levels of compliance with these regulated industries. So that would be one really strong case for a private orb. But yeah, in general, right? So if you're just, you know, a company that, you know, and you're already doing open source, yeah, they probably don't even care, right? But there are cases, and I would say like regulated spaces and industries definitely have, you know, it's just another layer of security.
It is important to point out, though, that you should, I mean, one reason I mentioned I'm cautious about people needing it, and like those are all very legitimate things that you pointed out, but a reason someone might want to do it that isn't a legitimate reason, you should not be putting secrets in config ever, for instance, right? Like some people are trying to put information that they consider to be secret within their orbs, and that's why they're trying to do private orbs, and that is the absolute wrong way to go about that. So if the goal is to hide some information in an orb, not the way to do it.
No, yeah, I mean, right. And I think even GitHub would, if you stick your AWS keys, right, and publish them accidentally, it's going to flag it and let you know, hey, you know, and actually, this has happened to me in the past. AWS has contacted me because I was the security contact, right, on our account. And it's like, hey, there's some creds out there in the wild, right, in a public repo. And I'm like, oh, great, shit. So, you know, yes, for that purpose, right, you're totally correct in that sense. But again, right, like there's just different levels of industry and then regulation that certain developers have to work under and constraints. So cool. Awesome. I think, yeah, we've exhausted. Well, hold on. There's one more. I want to
really just to follow up there, just
okay.
to the reasons for kind of looking at the kind of the private orbs. It revolves around highly specified for custom pipelines. So that's
Okay,
what
cool,
was
cool.
kind of motivating that question. So
Nice.
we've kind of reached our time. We've gone over just a little bit, but I want to thank everyone that's joined, attendees that had some really great questions. I want to thank Kyle for joining us. We'll look to see him in future sessions as well. And again, thank you for joining Open Circle Sessions. And Angel, do you have anything to close out with?
Yeah. So again, echo what you just said, Kyle. Thank you so much for sharing that knowledge, man. I learned a few things today, which was awesome as usual. I really love that. And then so Enjum, if you want to learn more about developing Orbs, just reach out to one of us or check out the docs. And we have a discuss forum, right? Just answer or ask your questions in there. We're watching that, and folks are at Circle are watching that, and they'll answer as quickly as possible. But yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I want to thank everybody for showing up, and we're going to be doing the next one. I guess we can announce, right?
The next one is going to be April 30th, so 2 weeks from today, and we're going to be discussing streamlining your pipelines. Making the most out of your pipelines and make them work and be as efficient as possible. So definitely tune in for that.
We're bringing on like the guy who's working hands-on on this stuff. So, he's one of the authorities on this at Circle, and should be able to like give us some really good information on, how to orchestrate your pipeline so that you're getting the most bang for your buck, right? Getting things done faster, more efficiently, and hopefully even, some streamlining of the config file so that you're doing things a lot cleaner and streamlined. So that's it. Thanks everyone.
Again, thank you very much. We will see you all next time.